Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I talk about every single book on my shelf because I just made the rainbow and it felt like a good opportunity. What do we think? It's like a vague rainbow and I'm slightly concealing some of the messier portions with my body. Today we're going to be having a little chat about The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I was bought this book as a gift. I can't remember when. I think it must have been my birthday in 2020. Would that match up with pub dates? Something like that. Regardless of where books are coming from, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. I have had a review copy of TJ Klune's other book, Under the Whispering Door, just for full disclosure on that one. I am going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. If you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, click away now. I will also link the story graph for this book below in case you want to look up any content warnings. The House in the Cerulean Sea came out in 2020 and took the internet by storm for a number of reasons, some of which we will get into here. As ever, I urge you to do your own research, to look into things for yourself and form your own opinions. I'm just sharing my own thoughts, feelings and opinions as a person who comes with all of the biases and things that come with existing on this earth. Pinched from TJ Klune's website, TJ Klune is a queer author aiming to write more positive queer stories into the world. There we go. As I mentioned, I have also read Under the Whispering Door, which is his latest work that came out this summer. No, summer of 2020. The summer just gone, and I will talk about that towards the end. Let me read you the blurb. Linus Baker is a by-the-book caseworker in the department in charge of magical youth. At 40, he lives in a tiny house with a devious cat and his old records for company, but his quiet life is about to change. Linus is summoned by extremely upper management and given a curious and highly classified assignment: travel to an orphanage on a distant island and determine whether 6 dangerous magical children are so dangerous, in fact, that they're likely to bring about the end of days. When Linus arrives at that strangest of islands, he's greeted by a series of mysterious figures, the greatest mystery of which is Arthur Parnassus, the master of the orphanage. As Linus and Arthur grow closer, Linus discovers the master would do anything to keep the children safe, even if it means the world has to burn. Or worse, his secret comes to light. We're about to be interrupted by a dog. The House in the Cerulean Sea is an enchanting love story, masterfully told about the profound experience of discovering an unlikely family in an unexpected place and realising that family is yours. Hello! Hi! Was it get too cold downstairs? You're very beautiful, but bed... So that's your basic plot summary as presented on the back of the book. Fair warning for those wanting to learn a bit more about the controversy surrounding this book. My reviews typically follow a pros, then cons / things you might want to keep in mind section. So we are going to start with the things that I like about this book. I urge you to stay on till the end just to hear some of the more critical elements of this. Just good things to do. Let us accept that there is some nuance to this. This is not black and white internet thinking, okay? So I do think this is genuinely a very lovely story at its most surface level, right? So you can read this and have an enjoyable time. There is a reason a lot of people called this a really cozy book, a really sweet book, a really positive queer story, because it is. It is a nice book. It features older queer characters, which isn't something that I'd read a lot of, and not like old, but older, just because a lot of the LGBT fiction tends to be publishing in YA at the moment rather than in adult, so it was nice to read a light-hearted, on the surface, adult fantasy, low magic, sort of, fantasy book that I think harkened to a lot of nostalgia for people for a lot of the stories that they had enjoyed previously. So we have this wonderful story of a positive representation of queer characters overcoming obstacles. That is a nice thing. I've described it as low fantasy. I think probably the better term would be a low explanation fantasy. There's a lot of quite major magical and supernatural things going on that I particularly enjoyed. I've really liked getting just like the surface level knowledge because it means you can impart all of your own, oh, I wonder if these exist in this world. I bet they do, and this is how that would pan out in this story. I enjoy that if you're looking for a very heavy magic system or if you're looking for a low magic but it's explained. That won't get you anywhere here. I also thought it was interesting to look at how the governance of magic would happen. I think that's always something that's kind of interested me from way back when I was reading like the inheritance cycle and we're talking about how do you control magicians. And while this book takes a fairly like negative viewpoint, I think, of the way that that's being done, I think it's interesting to explore. The characters are really lovely. I mentioned our older queer main characters. I love them a lot, and the children are also fantastic. There's a lot of very like vibrant characters in this story. I would love to read like little novellas of each of their lives. What are they like when they grow up? That kind of thing. I think that would be really interesting. And I think a lot of the reason people love this story is they could see themselves in various different characters, which I think is always a win. It's also immensely possible to draw fan art of this series is another thing that I think drives a lot of engagement online with books. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to be said about this series, and a lot of it has been said by other people. And equally speaking, there is a caveat to all of that. And this is, again, I'm going to talk about this. This is from my own perspective and my own conclusions I have drawn, and you are entirely within your rights to make other ones. I'm already slightly dreading the comment section on this video, so I'm not going to dig into the entire ins and outs, receipts, screenshots of the controversy, because that has been done by other people. But essentially it boiled down to TJ Klune saying in an interview that a part of the inspiration for this book, and or a large part of the inspiration, we don't really know how much of it, was inspired by the 60s scoop, which was a thing that happened in Canada, though similar things have been employed in various different parts of the world. And that was where Indigenous children were being taken forcibly from their families and placed with middle-class white families. And the idea was, well, you'll become white now. Hooray! We have saved this person, because colonialism likes to do that, because it's bad. And this was a comment made around about the same time as the residential schools were really breaking in the media. And I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't have been bad if that news story hadn't also been breaking, but I think it's important to note that those two things were happening at the same time. A lot of people were praising this book for being a wonderful, cosy, light-hearted read, and this news was breaking about these atrocities committed in residential schools, and the fact that they existed being a bad thing. I already owned this book at that point, and I decided to read it knowing those things going in. And I think that's really what I urge you to do. If you do already own this book, or you would like to read it, then I would suggest going in knowing that that was an inspiration and understanding the slight issue with that. I personally come from the mindset of, especially if you're not actively giving money or promoting the thing, you can read something critically, and also we can accept that there's nuance in this. So I read this knowing that and trying to keep that in mind as I was reading, and I think I can kind of see both sides. I can see it as this very cozy, happy story, and then you can read it with the lens of, this was inspired by a genuine thing that happened that was terrible, and is trying to, or not even trying to, and does, put this very happy spin on it. And if we assume that the 60s scoop was a large inspiration for this book, I think it does play into the idea of white audiences in particular not caring about atrocities that are put on people of colour, particularly Indigenous people of colour, unless they happen to people who look like us. So one really good example is missing persons. How many white missing children are there that people know a lot more about the cases of, care about, and are more likely to share than people of colour who go missing? It's a thing that we know, we see it. And I think there's really valid conversations that this book has brought up about co-opting trauma and that kind of thing. I had to do a lot of thinking when I was scripting this video, and I still don't think I'm being particularly coherent about it, so I apologise for that, and I suggest you go and watch some other people's videos who will be speaking with much more authority and much more coherence than I am. But I think I came down on, I do not believe, personally, that TJ Klune was attempting to write a direct allegory to the 60s scoop. However, I think that inspiration is clear, and I think it does make the book overall feel much less of a cosy, fun, wonderful time if you read it with that focus, with that, why do I care so much about this if I'm not also caring about this, or if I'm not even more caring about this real thing that happened? So you can choose to read this book if you would like to. You can choose this to be a comfort read. I think it is still an enjoyable read, which is why part of this is so difficult to wrap your head around. And I think part of why people were really frustrated at not being heard when it came to this book, especially the people who'd been talking about these issues before it got onto main book Twitter spaces. Because it is difficult to have someone go, this is wonderful, this is so cozy and lovely, when for you it is drawing on stories that are really painful. I can't tell you what to read, I can't tell you what to do. I'm uncomfortable making this video. I debated not publishing it at all, but I think we need to be able to have these kind of nuanced conversations. Let's try and have one. So I would say if you wanted to read this, you can. I can't stop you. I would urge you to read it with that critical lens. My other con, which I came up with after having that whole brain explosion happen out of my head, I think some people might find this too sweet, which feels bizarre, having just said all the things that I've said, but I think if you didn't have that lens on it, and also you are a person who doesn't really like cozy stuff, you probably wouldn't enjoy this. That's just an aside. In some ways this is a very normal review, and in some ways it requires a lot more caveats and questions, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I personally did enjoy Under the Whispering Door, which I think I read it before reading this. I can't quite remember the timeline, but I did think that that was very good. It's an interesting study of grief and death and loss. I'm all about reading books that explore death ritual and afterlives. I think I'd like to make a whole video on that at some point. But yes, Under the Whispering Door is a good time if you did want to read a different TJ Klune book to get a sense of what he's like as an author. And the other really obvious comparison that you can make is to the Wayward Children series by Shannon Maguire, which features a lot of queer characters, children who need taking care of in a lot of ways, but also who can take care of themselves, and found family and friendship and all of those things, but in a very different context. I did want to include some books by Indigenous authors at the end of this video because I think that's really important to promote, and it would be great to read more books by Indigenous authors. I realised I have read woefully few. I have read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is set in a pre-Columbian America-inspired fantasy setting. I'm very excited for the sequel to come out there. I would really love to read Alatso, which I believe that's how it's pronounced. I don't actually know, but this looks absolutely lovely. I've seen this on a few people's TBRs recently and I'm very interested in it. I'm just looking up some others now so that I can put some more up on the screen as prompts for me to remember. Love After the End, an anthology of two-spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction, sounds like exactly what I need. And I've had the Marrow Thieves on my obtain this at some point and read it list for quite a while. I maybe need to persuade myself to get to that. So those are just a few. Obviously there are probably heaps more out there, and if you have any recommendations, please plonk them down in the comments below. I would love to do like a full Indigenous authors TBR at some point because I feel like it's a place that I'm really missing in my reading, so I would like to do that. Make up your own minds, make your own decisions, live your best life. I hope that this was okay. I hope I've managed to edit this into somewhat of a coherent discussion. I think my broad themes are that colonialism is bad and we should be critical when we're reading books that draw inspiration from things, even if they are not directly creating allegories for that. There we go. Thank you so much for watching. I don't feel comfortable doing the whole like and subscribe thing right now, so I'm just going to say that's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.